Fleda Brown is here. Welcome, Fleda.
Hi, Aaron. I'm here today with Jennifer Sperry Steinorth, and we'll be talking about her new book of poems, Awake with Nine Shades. Jen has previously won the 2010 Michigan Writers Cooperative Press Contest with her chapbook, Forking the Swift, and she's had many poems since published in major journals. She has a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry from Warren Wilson College, and she's received grants from and been a participant at the Community of Writers at Squaw Valley, the Swanee Writers Conference, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Bear River Writers Conference. Awake with Nine Shades is Jen's first full-length collection from Texas Review Press. So here we are, and this is Michigan Writers on the Air, and we are in Michigan, and I'm wondering, Jen, what do you think of when you think of your work in connection with being a Michigan writer?
Thanks, Fleda. That's a great question. I've given some thought to that, and I think that my poems may not always be readily recognizable as Michigan poems in that I don't necessarily talk about specific places, but water is a big feature and comes up quite a bit in my work. And I think the landscape itself, we live in this place that is for so many months blanketed in white. The water is big and flat and spacious, so there is a sense of spaciousness and emptiness that formally I think is represented in my work. And I think the community here is very much an influence on my work, the voices that I hear traveling, and the way that we often are enveloped in the snowy landscape and, pulled into interior spaces for long periods of the year as well. I think those are ways that...
Which brings me to a poem that I'm fond of, and it's called Blizzard. I wonder if you'd read that one.
Absolutely. Blizzard. Even as it's happening, us in the squad car, watching the wrecker reel our broken wagon onto the trailer, squinting through wet gusts that make the whole of it disappear. I can't believe it. What? The fact of our accident's certain occurrence, certain fatality briefly averted? No, these I believe. But the opaque mass of gray-celled drifts, the storm's full stop and existential rift, snuffing eyes hold on matters appearing fixed, then proffering the handle of vision back again. The squad car lights, pulsing hazards, our car, their car, wrecker, blink, blindness, a gulf we cannot leap.
So this poem is rich with trouble and the threat of trouble. It isn't related directly to the title of your book, but your book seems to pick up a lot of the tension of that particular poem. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the title of the book and how you developed how you arranged the book around that title.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think weather is something that figures into the book in various ways: socio-political weather, natural weather, and the title "Awake" is two words: wake, with nine shades. The word wake appears in multiple titles of poems throughout the book, and By wake, I mean wakes on the water. I mean the wake that occurs after the death of a dear one, and also waking up. So there's an insomnia sequence that occurs in fragments throughout the book. Little fragments appear and then dissolve, and then another poem will come onto the page, and then there'll be some more fragments of this sort of insomnia sequence. So the long insomnia poem is based on a poem by Carolyn Bergvall via 48 translations of Dante, and in her poem she is reading 48 different English translations of the first 3 lines of Dante's Inferno, which is various versions, but one version is midway through the journey of my life, I found myself in a dark wood, the right road lost. And in my collection, the speaker keeps waking up in the middle of the night. So one of these versions is midway through our night's sleep, I woke to find the dream lost, my body shaken from its salt. Next comes, at the midpoint of the night we were allotted, I found myself in dark apartment. So these fragments become a sort of lyric that weave throughout the poem, a sort of waking up that keeps happening through various sorts of accidents or turmoil or storms. So that's one of the ways that the title is figuring in with wake. And then the shades also references Dante. In Dante's Inferno, the poet goes down into the underworld and is engaging with the ghosts that he refers to in most English versions as shades. And so there are multiple ghosts that appear in this book as well.
Besides the wake used in multiple ways, it feels that there is a particular instance that keeps recurring, and I'm finding that in the poem Wake and an Island. Would that be a good one for you to give us?
Absolutely. Wake and Island. Pressed between blue pages, a few hours on our old boat, which is not ours, my leg over the bow, you in the stern with the kids in the stern. I'm reading poems, you're not, the sky, a depression of noon wilting on our way back from the island we did not reach. The boys drag bits of pita through, some dip, argue the last cola. We are not arguing now. I said what I thought, you said what you thought, and I won. It's not nice. What do you want? I said, and you don't know. It's been so long since I even wondered, you said, pinned here in this book. Almost no wind, none, the water glass, like old glass, that much ripple, that much distortion. 2 small sailboats go by port side, one red-hulled, the other white. It's not our boat, your father's gone. Days don't get more beautiful than this, the white-hazed blue, a few big clouds. We could not stand it any bluer, and the land rolls up away. The glass reflects the sky. Thank God we cannot see ourselves, for home we're headed. Nothing violent, nothing shattered. Glass, the surface just before us, always smooth, always untouched, and when we mar it, it repairs itself with no help from us.
That poem seems to return to the smooth surface, but open up just a chasm right in the middle of the poem, or not a little bit farther from the middle. It's not our boat, your father's gone. And I noticed that this happens, as you said before, a lot of times in the book. There are places that just kind of open up little windows to a narrative that never quite breaks the surface. It's almost like it's partial sleep and waking. Waking like that. Mm-hmm. How did you plan the arrangement of the poems in this book?
it saw a lot of different arrangements. And one of the things that I came to feel was that the book, there were many threads, and I needed to weave it together a little bit tighter. And it came to feel like the various pieces were not as distinct from one another as they might seem to be. By that I mean the poems, there are many distinct poems. They each have their own title, they have their own pages, but there are a way in which they all feel like they're part of a singular whole in my mind, and trying to balance the various different sensibilities and losses. There's the loss of my father-in-law that figures in. There's some financial insecurity. There are political, socio-political climate that we're in that feels tumultuous for us, but then even more tumultuous for others in the world. All these things felt like they were part of one tapestry. And so I took the fragmentary piece that was the insomnia poem and broke it up and used it to sort of weave together the other pieces. So these little fragments become sort of stitches that hold together the other poems and some of the other disparate sensibilities, I hope.
Speaking of stitching together, some of the marks that you use in the book, in the poems, sometimes within the poems, slash marks backward, slash marks forward, and large spaces and suddenly small spaces, and it might leave a reader who's unaccustomed to that feeling a little lost. I'm wondering what advice you would give a reader about how to enter your book and how to travel through your book.
The marks and the various distances, the use of white space, is not meant in any way to push the reader aside, rather to help the reader. So I would say if seeing such a thing feels uncomfortable, if they can be okay with that level of a little bit of discomfort, that some of the material is uncomfortable, and the space is meant to allow the reader to have space to move from one idea to another, and give them space. Sometimes the white space on the page for me is evoking time. Sometimes it's a shift from one voice to another. Sometimes the slash marks are meant to evoke a sort of abruptness between taking one thing and, shoving it against something else. And however the reader is experiencing this, there isn't a right way. It's whatever their experience is their experience, and I hope that it's able to give them space to enter difficult ideas for themselves in ways that feel like they have a friend, like they are not alone.
I found an interesting clue in the book, and that is that your father-in-law was a great fan of Robert Frost, and at some place in the poems you mention that one of the problems you had with Robert Frost is the fact that the poem is so finished, so completely, in a sense, kind of sealed off by being finished. And so when I read your poems, I'm reading with that information in mind, that the poem is always in the act of creating itself. And so if I'm uncomfortable, it might be my discomfort with having to be within something that's not completely formed. Is that am I reading the way you would like me to read?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, it's a beautiful reading of it. I also think sometimes it's that the poem may not be trying to create closure where there isn't closure, or where closure may not, at least for this poet at this moment, be possible. But yet I don't feel that just because we haven't found closure that we must turn away from things, that sometimes we have to remain present in uncomfortable spaces in order for knots to begin to unravel, even if they don't get all the way there.
I see a lot of concern with the very private grief and the private world and the public. And I'm wondering how you negotiated that territory. And it's something that almost all of us who write about things that are very close to us have to struggle with. How do you negotiate that territory?
Carefully. I try to pull in larger things that are recognizable to others. Try to see where my life is a small version of a larger story, and where I can draw on those larger stories to illuminate something personal, and maybe in so doing maybe surprise myself. That's always the hope is, and I found most of the poems that have remained in the book through the various drafts are poems where I was truly surprised in what was revealed in the writing of them. One of the ways, I think, Ordinary Shears maybe would be a good poem to illuminate that. In this poem, well, there's a big iconic figure. I'll read the poem and then I'll share a little bit. Ordinary Shears. Scarlett O'Hara refashioned herself, a gown of emerald velvet curtains, flanking book-length drawing-room windows, the twisted tassels looped in loose embrace round her corseted waist, dark locks festooned with smart pleated hat and verdant plumes. Her tragedy, now iconography. In our rooms, love, there are only shears. Gauzy raiment of dingy lace that whimpers in faintest breeze, obscuring nothing but the hard edges of trees in winter. Anyone outside in the dark could see us, wielding small cruelties together and apart. It doesn't make us stars.
Jennifer Sperry Steinorth, thank you so much. And I want to mention that if our listeners would be interested in finding out more about Jen Steinorth, where she's reading, what she's doing, you can check out her wonderful website at
JenniferSperrySteinorth.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fleda. Thank you, Erin.